Beseder. We're up to Siman Lamed Gimel Halacha Dalet. Halacha Dalet. Okay. Toiv sheyashchirem Yisrael lishman v'lo eni Yehudi. It's good that the Yisrael blackens them and not the eni Yehudi, not a non-Jewish person. Umiu says the Ramah, but the Eved kosher im hishchir habatim. But the Eved, if he blackens, he does the black on the batim, on the of the batim, that's okay. Aval haretzuos afilu b'di'eved posel. The b'di'eved, even b'di'eved, it's no good. You've got to have a Yehudi doing the black on the Retzuos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, you've got an chof base. Toiv. Aval b'di'eved, according to the Mechaber, kosher l'didei afilu alidei en Yehudi. If the en Yehudi does the shachar, does the black on the batim, then it's okay. To svirele, because he holds that afilu b'retzuos leibo in hashchers klal lishmon, because he holds that even the retzuos does not need to be done lishma. The Ramah b'hagoch chaylik alav, the Ramah argues svirele to b'retzuos the hashchers halacha Moshe Sinai, that the retzuos, the halacha is the blackness is a halacha Moshe Sinai. Tzorech hashachros lishmon, they also therefore need to be lishmon. U'memele ben Yehudi they know it's lishmon possible, and then any Yehudi can't do it lishma, and therefore it's possible. V'dinoi kedelel b'simin lamed beis l'inyan klaf ayin shom, and therefore it has the same halacha like we discussed with regard to the klaf. Avol b'er habatim, but the leather used for the batim, the l'roiv poiskim shachrusuhu l'mitzvah ba'alma, that the blackness of the batim is a mitzvah ba'alma, v'lo lekuven is not ma'akev, v'chodelel b'simin lamed beis mem, v'lekach lo bo'in bei gam kein hashachrus lishmon b'di'eved. Therefore, even b'di'eved, if the shachrus is not done lishmon, not the end of the world. V'havle l'ramah lichtev hagosoi b'loshen yesh omrim. You should have expressed it as yesh omrim. We do find that the Ramah sometimes does that without introducing it as a yesh omrim. Okay. Aval Retzuos, it says so. The Ramah said the Retzuos has got, even b'di'eved, have got to be done by the Yisrael. Im Osen Nachri is no good. Afilu Yisrael ach shalei lishmon, or even if Yisrael did it shalei lishma, then it doesn't work. So even Nachri does the Retzuos, the blacking for the Retzuos, or even Yisrael does it shalei lishma, it's no good. Vatam kanal b'sif cotton chof beis. V'kol shkein dechol dov shetzorach b'tefillin gufa lekuva. And that's generally the rule. Anything that has to be done to the tefillin lekuva, that makes the tefillin no good if you don't do it. Kamoi asiyas habayis, for example, making of the bayis, v'hashin shaloi, or putting the shin on the tefillin sharosh, v'chol prot of shiyah kedin, it's got to be exactly like that. Oit firoso, the stitching of it, asiyas hakesher shaloi, or making of the kesher, v'chol elu halacha Moshe Sinai. All of these aspects are halacha Moshe Sinai. Im ason Yisrael shel lishmon possible, and therefore if Yisrael does any of these, shel lishmon is possible. Because our prima godim, the yesh limnoa melasus calls out a cotton, and therefore you should avoid having a child doing any of these. Afilim godl yamid al gaboy, even if the godl is standing on top of him and v'yitzaveu lasos lishmon, reminding him, telling him, instructing him to do it lishma, you should avoid that. V'chein shel lasos malei isha, and so too to get a woman to do it. V'chol ha'psulin ha'mavur lekaman b'simen lamates. Ein Shom, because they're not mitzvah in the actual thing. V'ashchoras haretzuos, but the blackening of the retzuos, the ze'ena beguf hatfilin, that's not in the guf of the tefillin. Muta alidei isha, then a woman would be able to do that. V'hi yadas lasos lishma k'mish, because she's able to do things lishma, but because it's not in the guf of the tefillin, and therefore it would be okay for an isha to do that. Aval alidei eni Yehudi v'katan, but to do it with an eni Yehudi, or to do it with a child, ena mutat sheyamid acher al gabom, then it would only help if somebody else stands next to them and tells them to do it. Uchadel in klaf b'simin lamed beis ayin shom b'siftes. Posel. So this is going on the last bit of the Ramah, that the Ramah says that the retzuos which are not done lishma, retzuos afilu b'di'eved is posel. You cannot have an eni Yehudi doing the blackening of them. Kosav Magen Avram. If the Yisrael goes over them and blackens the Retzuos, Lishmon, that's kosher. And he brings a proof for it. So they argue with the Magen Avram. And they question this concept of whether Yisrael can go over the Retzuos to blacken them if they were originally done by Nachri. The Prima Godim gives a different Eitzah. What does he suggest? He says, blacken the other side. Shel Retzuos, Lishmon. Da'af shehushchu mishnei tzodim kosher. Kamavu b'sif gimel. V'yahapech hatzad shehushchu lishmon lemalo. And put the side which you have blackened, and let that face outwards. V'chol zeh hu im ein lo Retzuos acheres. This is only b'di'eved that he hasn't got any other Retzuos or commercial bi'arnu b'bei halacha. Okay, so that's the end of Dalet. That's the machlekas between the Mechaber and the Ramah. Beseder. Okay, good. Let's go to Hey, Halacha Hey. Now this is quite a motzu shaila. What happens if your Retzuos snap? Says the Mechaber, Im nifsaka haretzuah. If the Retzuah snaps, yesh matirim litfer mitzad ponim. There are those who are matir to stitch the tzad ponim. Now what does that mean? So say for example, you've got some Retzuos, yeah? Now we'll discuss where the tear is. But what he's saying over here is, if the Retzuos tear, you can stitch it, let's add pnim on not the outer side, but on the inner side of it, you can stitch it. So Eli, if you go to page 244, you can see it perhaps a bit more clearly, that you stitch the inside of the tefillin. Just if it snaps, you can stitch it over there. Right? It says, so that's what Mechaber means. If the Retzuah snaps, Yesh matir nitva mitzad pnim, the inside, not the bit facing outside, the inside you can stitch. The yesh imrim, mashim makif mimena harosh, the bit of the sharosh which covers the head. In other words, here's the sharosh. So if the tear is somewhere over here, over there, right? The bit which, this is the most important part, this we're going to be more machmir about that. If the tear is over here, over shel yad, or in the shel yad, the bit which goes around the arm, so again, it's this bit over here, the bit where you're the upper part of the Retzuos. So yesh omrim mashim makif mimena harosh, the top part of the sharosh which covers the head, or b'shel yad, or in the shel yad kadesh takif azroya, liksha tefillah, where you actually tie it im azroya, or kadesh timochsech ad etzba, or and that bit where you stretch it ad etzba im tzois. In other words, if you look, Eli, in your one, the picture is on, it's page 246, picture number 1. Nearly Chaim, yeah. So, which part of the shel yad? It's not just this bit, but it's the amount of Retzuah. Which, if you just put it, if you imagine you put this over here, on top of my jacket, yeah, and then you stretch it down to the hand like that. That amount of Retzuah, that's considered the top part. You just stretch it literally without winding anything. Yeah, so that's that picture, and you tie it around the finger. So he's got a picture over here. Can you see that amount of Retzuah on the shel yad? Yeah. So says the Mechaber over shel yad, kadesh takif hazor liksha tefillah im hazor kadesh timosach ad etzba im zois. You stretch it down to the middle finger, v'yichrich mena al oisa etzba, and you wind it around the finger, sholosh krichos v'yikshur, 3 times. Then you tie it. That part of the sharosh or the shel yad. That's a snap in that part of the Retzuah. You've got no takona. You can't tie it. Yeah, just tie a little knot, or to stitch it. But anything beyond that, we've of course got the Retzuah much longer because we wind it around our arm several times. Or the sharosh, it goes down much further than what we just described. For that, the atfira and the kshira doesn't puzzle it. In other words, to say for example, the sharosh, yeah, so the bit which is going down, we'll discuss soon in the Mishnah Berurah exactly how far down, but the bottom part of the Retzuos, if there's a break, you can stitch that, or you can even tie a knot in the Retzuos and that would work. But the upper part, i.e. of the sharosh, the bit around the head, or the shel yad, which is the top part which goes down as I described in one length, that part is a problem, but beyond that, any stitching or any tying would be okay. It says the Mechaber at the end, V'shas hatchak, yesh lismech ala matirin kadesh lo yisbatel mitzvah tefillin. We can be somech on the more lenient opinion so that you shouldn't be mevatel mitzvah of tefillin. Okay, let's do the Mishnah Berurah. So the first opinion was yesh matirim litfer mitzat pnim. If there is a snap, you can stitch it on the inside, the bit not which is facing outside, the inside of the Retzuah. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Sifkot and Chafei, Yesh Matirim. So in other words, according to the first opinion, even in the top bit, if there's a snap, you can stitch it on the underside, no problem, on either of these two places. Litvar mitzad pnim, says the Mishnah Berurah in Siman Chof Vov. This is still in the lenient opinion that you could stitch it in the more important part of the Retzuos. Dafka tfira. Dafka, we allow you to stitch it. Avol kashira. So imagine if you avol kashira, b'toich shir hana lekula alma postel min haTorah. That doesn't work. So imagine over here you've got a snap in the tefillin. To stitch it from the inside would be okay according to the first opinion, but to tie it, that would not be okay. To fix it. Why? Because he says, kesher tom. It's got to be a clean, beautiful, clean knot. Dahainu, the Retzuah with which you tie your tefillin, you attach the tefillin to you, tama u'shlema v'lo kashura. It should be perfectly sholem and not tied at all. V'gam ha'tfira hu davka begidin v'lo b'chutin, and davka the tfira, when you do stitch it, it's got to be done begidin with the sinews, as we've discussed, v'lo b'chutin, and not just done with some thread. Kosav v'tshuvas tvashmu the nifsuka ha'ma'abarta. The ma'abarta we said is this part where it goes through. If that breaks, you imagine there's like it comes away over here. I've seen one of those recently. It comes away over there. Then in nifsuka ha'ma'abarta mutul tofra, you can stitch the ma'abarta to fix that up. Okay, mitzad pnim. This is still going on the yesh matirim. Kadesh lo yehen min karbachut. So you stitch on the inside of the Retzuah, that it's not visible from the outside. And certainly if it's that part of the Retzuah which is hidden in the Mabarta, then no problem. Okay, now, then we said yesh omrim, that it depends. That if you're in the top part of the sharosh or the shalyad, then you can't fix it at all. How much is the top part of the shalyad? All the way down to the finger. When you just put it on and then you stretch it down, one stretch down to the middle finger. Etzba. So you just stretch it without winding it around, like I showed you, just all the way down to the middle finger. That is the shear, the length of the shalyad, of the Retzuah shalyad. Okay. Hamatirim. So then we said, so you've got two opinions. The first opinion says you can do it on the inside with a tefira, but not a kshira. The second opinion says, yesh omrim, that you can do it with the ein lohem takana lo b'kshir v'lo b'tefira. According to the second opinion, more strict, you can't fix the top part of the shalyad or the sharosh at all, and anything beyond that, you can do it. So, and then the Mechaber concludes that b'shas hatchag yesh lismoich ala matirim. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Siman Choftes, Hainu, the muta afilu litfer begidim b'toich hashir shemakif harosh v'kiberes. I.e., you can be makel and you can rely on the opinion which says that you can be toifer begidim within this shir, shemakif harosh, even the very top part of the sharosh or the shalyad around the kiberes. V'chutz l'shir zeh muta afilu liksha you're muta liksha afilu koshken litfer b'chutin. And beyond that part, you can even be kosher. Not only can it be toifer, but you can even be kosher. You can actually tie it. With all of this, when you fix it in this way, you can't make a broch on that. Because mi'ikar din, you should be machmir like the yesh omrim, that you cannot fix the tefillin in this way, and the sofik Torah lechumra. That you shouldn't just abandon the mitzvah totally. You should put them on until you find an alternative pair. According to the Taz, he paskens that a Retzuah like this shall rosh, and you can't make a broch on it. The right hand side coming down of the Retzuah is at hatibur, goes down to the navel, the belly button, or small at hachos, and the left one goes down to the chest. That is the minimum shear, and that has to be sholim, and that has to be belik shear tefira without any tying or stitching or any repair work. Aval b'Sefer Eli Rabba hichriya lahalacha. The Sefer Eli Rabba, however, says lahalacha the bein sharosh or bein shalyad levad ma sheyesh b'soich hashir shemakiv harash v'kibaris yochel l'tofrei. Aside from the bit which is around the head, the very, very top bit, or the bit like I described around the way you actually tie it, yochel l'tofrei. You are able to stitch it, af shaloi b'shas hatchak ulevarech aleim, and to make a bracha, even if it's not shas hatchak. Ach sheizor litva mitzat pnim, but just make sure you do it on the inside, shelo yehi minka tfiris mibachut, so that the stitching shouldn't be visible from the outside. Dimu minka, because if it's visible, le'otiv mikesha, there's no better than a kesha, which is more problematic. The gam sheba gidin, and when you stitch it, it should be done with the gidin. Ava b'chutin, but just done with thread or kshira, or tying it osa afil b'sharosh. That is osa even in the sharosh. V'chein pasuk b'sefer Yeshuas Yaakov v'derech Chaim. Umikol makom im yochel lahasig Retzuos shlema. If you can find a complete Retzuah, b'vaday nochen lahachmir lechatchila b'kataz, you should certainly be machmir like the taz, like we said. Ki kama me'achroni zmanenu hetiku dvar v'lahalocha, because many of the achronim follow the opinion of the Taz. But in a difficult situation, you can be sonach on the goinim and to make a bracha with prat. Im nisha b'shalrosh shnei tefachim tzluyim, that you have two tefach which are hanging down beyond levad mashemakif resho, beyond what is around the head. But vada yesh lismech lahakal demani tefira, you can be soimech that tefira is okay. V'ayin le'el b'simen chov zayin b'mishnah berurah sifkat mem dalet. Now, if the Retzuah snaps b'rochba, that means you've got the Retzuah and you've got a little incision over here. So say, can you see if you can see? Imagine you've got a little cut over here. So it's going across the width of the Retzuah, but it hasn't gone fully across. So that's what he's referring to. Im nifsaka Retzuah b'rochba, v'lo nisha kaser sa'ur, and it hasn't left you with the size of a sa'ura, which is a barley bean, which is a very small amount. The Prima Godim leaves it as Tzorachin, whether you can stitch that. Okay, say that.